I could talk to you for 10 hours about surrogacy. So I have maybe 15 minutes. Do I have 15 minutes? Just throw something at me when it's time to quit. So I'm going to focus on 2 different areas, and then if you have questions, I'm here to give you the information you need. So I'd really be better off just standing here and say, hey, what do you want to know? But I'm going to start out first, and then you can do that. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, because it's on the sign, ethical surrogacy. I'm going to talk to you about what, as a professional that has been doing this for 25 years, I think an ethical surrogacy is. And then you each have to decide for yourself what kind of process you want to participate in. The second thing I'm going to talk to you about, because I think it's probably a question that many of you have, how do I pick an agency if I'm going to work in another country and I need an agency to help me? What are the distinguishing factors? Now, my daughter, who works in my agency with me, would say, Dad, you got to stand up and tell them why to use us. Well, no, not so much. I want to tell you how to pick a good agency, and then I want you to ask me questions so that I can tell you, yeah, I'm a good agency, but I'm going to start you objectively. So now I'm going to move over here, Ron. So, I was a high school teacher in my first life, so I really feel comfortable in front of the whiteboard here. An ethical surrogacy to me, first of all, starts with desire. Now what does that mean? Only people that truly want to participate in the process should. If Shantae is an egg donor, not because she wants to, but because someone told her to, her husband, or because she was desperately financially at risk, or if Charity was a surrogate because of the same reasons, I don't think that's ethical. I think that women who choose to participate in this process should do so because of something they feel in here. And I know these 2 women both have that thing. And I think in the United States and anywhere else this is done, if you cannot start with that simple fact, you have a problem. Okay? I don't know how you gauge that. You have to look at the individual woman, you have to look at the society she was raised in, you have to look at the social norms that govern their behavior, and then you have to figure out, is she doing this because someone is telling her to, because she feels she has to, or because she wants to? For me, ethical only ends up in that last category. She has to have the desire. The second thing is proper screening. All right, I'm writing English, and I'm writing it badly. So hopefully you can still read it. So what does screening mean? That means that everybody that wants to be a surrogate or an egg donor shouldn't necessarily be a surrogate or an egg donor. You have to take the small percentage that want to and make them even smaller by putting them through ethical screening. So what does that mean to me? I run an agency. So when a woman comes to me and says, I want to be a surrogate, what questions do I have to ask? First of all, I have to ask, can you do this safely? Are you putting yourself at risk, or are you putting the baby at risk? How can I look at that or analyze that? I force every surrogate that comes to me and asks to be a surrogate to obtain and deliver to me for review by an obstetrician their entire pregnancy records from all their pregnancies, to make sure that they had safe, full-term, natural vaginal deliveries without any complications that could hurt them, and without any complications that could hurt your child if she decides to carry it for you. If she's got a bad pregnancy record already, if she's had gestational diabetes of a high level, or preeclampsia, or various conditions which can show that she has a hard time delivering her babies, I'm not going to let her, even though she has the desire. I do criminal background checks on them to make sure we're not having felons as surrogates. I think that's a baseline. The other thing that I look at is we have each surrogate do a psychological evaluation with her husband or significant other. Why? Because we want to make sure that she is emotionally suited to follow through on the promise that she's making to you. Part of that is requiring all surrogates to have had their own children so that they've experienced a full-term pregnancy, they know what it means to deliver a child, and they know what the emotional reaction is. If they can't do that, how can they give you informed consent and say, yes, I know what it's like and I know I can deliver that baby to you without any adverse emotional reaction to me? So she has to have had a pregnancy to know what her reaction is, and then she has to have a psychological evaluation to make sure that someone is telling her what unexpected parts of the process, and there are some, you got to understand that, she may not know about, so that when she decides to do it, she's also suitable to do it. So the first part is wanting to be, and the next one is being suitable to be. The next part of an ethical surrogacy process, to me, is the involvement of the proper professionals. International surrogacy is a complex matter. It involves the woman that is carrying the baby. It often involves the woman who's providing the egg. It involves the law of the country or state in which you're doing it in the United States. It involves the law in your country when you come home, because in my experience, when I talk to doctors, many of them will say, what's a successful surrogacy program? And they will say, well, if I give the live birth of a healthy baby, if I deliver to you a wiggling, squirming, crying little bundle of joy, it's a success. How many of you think that's a success? Raise your hand. Come on, raise your hand. This is interactive. You can't just sit there. I got to know you're awake. All right, so many of you agree. I'm a lawyer. I have disabilities because of that. So I say that a successful program is not the delivery of a healthy baby. It's a delivery of a healthy baby of whom you are the legal parent, for whom you can get citizenship in your home country. Because if your government will not make you the parent when you go home, or will not give your child citizenship, then having that squealing, squirming baby isn't necessarily a good thing. You're going to have a lot of heartache and a lot of problems. So, the proper professionals, the first professional you should hire in an ethical process, I'm assuming you're all from Sweden, is a lawyer in Sweden. The first question you ask before you start surrogacy is, when I come home, can I make that baby mine, and can I have the parentage I want, and can my baby live here as a Swedish citizen? If the answer to that is no, are you going to start the process at all? You might, but at least you should know that before you think about it. The second person that you should contact is a U.S. lawyer, because your Swedish lawyer is going to tell you, when you come back, this is the process you need to go through, whatever it is. Here are the documents I will have to give to the government. I need a birth certificate with you and the surrogate on it. Or I need a birth certificate with just the genetic father's name on it. Or if I get a birth certificate with both parents' names on it, that's best. In some states in the U.S., some of those things are possible and some aren't. There are only about 6 U.S. states that after a surrogacy will put 2 men's names on the birth certificate. If that's important to you, you probably want to know which states those are, and that's where you want to pick your surrogate. So, knowing what will be legally required here and talking about whether you can legally obtain it here is the first stage of that final result, a child of whom you're the legal parent that is a citizen of your home country. Then, in addition to the attorneys, you need a psychologist to do this part, to make sure that your surrogate is appropriate. And then you need a physician to talk to you about what the procedures, risks, and costs are going to be. So you need the confluence or joining together of legal, psychological, and medical experts to make sure you're making the decisions that are best for you. That's ethical. It's doing the process right. The next thing, I think, is to determine what kind of relationship you want with your carrier. You're going to have a woman who volunteers to carry your child. What is more intimate than that? Probably nothing. Frankly, the lawyers and the psychologists and the doctors that you pick should have that same feeling. If you're picking these professionals and they make it feel like a business transaction, maybe they have the wrong perspective. You should find people that understand how important and perhaps sacred this process is to you and your family. But the relationship with the surrogate factors into that. How many times have you been a surrogate?
4.
How often do you talk to most of your parents?
Some of them on a daily, some of them on a weekly, some of them a couple times a year.
You need to decide what kind of relationship you want with your carrier. But, you know, who would not want to know this wonderful young woman here after she carried your baby for 9 months? There are some places you go that you never even meet your surrogate. You have no knowledge of who she is, what she's like, why she's doing this, whether it's a good screening or not. And afterwards, you have no ability to contact her. You may not even speak the same language. So, part of your ethical determination is, can I have the kind of relationship I want with my carrier so that it feels not only right for me, but so that it validates her? How would you feel if somebody said, put an embryo in her, I don't want to talk to her, I'll come and pick up the baby, I don't care where she is and I never want to have any relationship. Would you feel affirmed?
No.
Okay, so that's ethics to me. That's a win-win. If at the end of the process, everybody that participates doesn't feel good about the process, then there's something wrong with it. Any place you go that has all of these things and protects the rights of the participants. So what do I mean by that? That means that everybody has separate representation. Separate representation means what's best for Shantae as an egg donor? To be stimulated to give 40 eggs and to hyperstimulate and have her stomach swell up and be all full of fluid and need to be drained and sent to the hospital? Probably not so much. Dr. Doyle would never do that. He's ethical. You stimulate your donors lightly so that because they're of a very fertile age and very easily stimulated to produce eggs, you minimize the amount of medication. So you want to work with doctors that understand that balance. And frankly, Shantae should have a second doctor that talks to her, just her, about what the risks of donation are, so that she can make a decision whether what Dr. Doyle is saying makes sense and is safe for her. I like it when physicians recommend donors have a consultation with a medical professional of her own or at his recommendation so that she understands the risks, because who is his loyalty to? No offense, Michael. Don't yell at me about this later. Who's his client? Who's his patient? You are. What's your best interest? You want 40 eggs. The more the better. I got plenty of embryos, I got plenty of frozen embryo transfers, so there's a conflict between what's best for you and what might be best for Shantae, and you want a physician that balances that. And I think the ASRM standards, which is the medical organization that governs fertility physicians in the United States, talks at some point about the possibility of separate medical consultation for the surrogate and the egg donor. The next thing is legal representation. If you're going to enter into an arrangement with a woman to carry your baby, you probably want to talk through with her every aspect of that process. So, How much contact do you want during the pregnancy, and how much do you want? Does it match? How much contact do you want after the birth, and how much do you want? Does that match? If Dr. Doyle puts in 2 embryos, which often results in twins, however, I have a fertility clinic in Minneapolis that's really good. They put 2 embryos in, they got, what do they call those? Quadruplets. 4 of them. If there's 4 babies in there and the doctor says, look, you can have 4 babies full term, but they're all going to be sick, and they're going to be really sick, and they're going to have big problems. And if we take 2 out and we do twins, they'll both be healthy. And you say, as the parent in the family that has to deal with these issues, I want my 2 children to be healthy, and frankly, I can only take care of 2 at a time anyway. You going to selectively reduce? Maybe, maybe not. You need to agree on that ahead of time. If it's a physically challenged child, if it has spina bifida, does she get to continue the pregnancy and deliver a child that's going to be in great pain and have a very short life expectancy? Or can you as the parent say, I want to terminate that pregnancy and start over? You have to agree on that. You write up a contract where you talk about all the kinds of things you would never think about. Can she drink caffeine? Can she get a tattoo? If she has a cat, can she clean the litter box? That's a toxic substance. There are so many things that we have learned in the United States affect these things that the contract is 46 pages long. Now, is it fair if the intended parent's attorney drafts that contract, hands it to her and says, sign this? Probably not. If you want an ethical surrogacy, you want her to have a separate lawyer in the U.S. that says, here, there's 46 pages of really complicated stuff in here that you may not understand, and this is what it all means. Are you okay with it? Do you agree? Do you want to change something? If you don't do that, I don't think you have an ethical surrogacy. I don't care what country you go to. All of this has to be in place. I can tell you for a fact that this is in place everywhere in the United States. I can't say the same thing about other places. Whether that makes a difference to you is an individual decision you have to make. Okay? There's a lot more to talk about that, but I can't. So, briefly, how do you pick an agency? Carefully, mostly. So I'm going to go through this really fast. First thing, agencies in the United States have no rules. There's no regulation. There's no government, statute, case law, or organization that says this is how you do it if you're an agency. Anybody can run an agency, including a convicted felon. There aren't any rules. All right? There have been agencies that have received a lot of money from parents, shut down and disappeared with the money, over $2 million. It's called Surrogenesis. It was in California. So, one of the things that you can do to minimize your risk is to use agencies that are run by professionals that have other ethical and legal rules and constraints. One of those kinds of professionals are attorneys. They have all kinds of ethical rules that if they don't follow, they lose their license and ability to practice. So it's a good start if an agency is run by an attorney. It's not the end. We had an attorney in California that just got disbarred because she was doing naughty things. So, but it's a start. Okay? The next thing you should look for, especially since you can't even trust attorneys. Some people say you can trust attorneys less than most people. That's not true in Sweden, though, is it? No. Okay. So, the next thing you want to look for, just in case the person isn't completely ethical, is you want to make sure they have professional liability insurance. You know how an attorney has malpractice insurance, so if I goof up as an attorney, my client can sue me and get money? That's how it works in the U.S. You know how a doctor has malpractice insurance, so if they do something wrong, you can sue them and get money? That's how it works in the U.S. You know how your car has insurance, so if you do something wrong, somebody can pay the other person? Professional liability insurance is for agencies so that if they do something wrong that harms you, that costs you money, they have an insurance company that says, we will pay you for what they did wrong. You should ask your agency whether they have that. The next thing you should ask them is whether or not they use an escrow company. So you may meet and hire an agency that's 2,000 or 3,000 miles away. And they'll say, yep, we'll do this for you. Send us $80,000. Wire that money right to this account. You've never met them. You've never looked them in the eye. You've never seen their offices. And you wire them $80,000. It happens all the time. I just can't imagine how that trust factor gets established, but I know it's a difficult one. An escrow company means that the person that owns the agency does not control the money. The money is in an escrow company that's somebody else, owned by somebody else, and the money is put in there under an agreement that says you only pay this out as the intended parents and their agency agree. If you put the money in here, they can steal it, they can spend it, they can lose it, they can get it taken by the tax authorities if they don't pay their taxes. So it's much better if the agency, for the largest part, which is usually your surrogate fee and some other long-term expenses, puts that with somebody else. Then you can't lose it, okay? Now, let's say that they do keep some money for monthly operating expenses. Then you want to make sure they have a bond. What's a bond? In the United States, a bond is something where a company comes in and looks at your processes and procedures. You tell them how you do business, how you deposit your money, what books and records you keep, whether you do annual accountings and things, and then they say, all right, we will insure you and we will give you a criminal bond. So if you steal the money, we will pay that money back and then we will take it from you. So these are three things that can help protect you financially as you hire an agency. You should ask those questions. Now, last thing, before I sit down and be quiet for a minute, cost. How do you compare agencies? You can't. You go on the internet, they all have websites. You can't make head or tails of them. You can't compare one agency to the next because they all give you different information. It's impossible. So really, I can't tell you either. I don't even know. But I have done some agency comparisons. So, the first thing that an agency will advertise is what is their fee. Let's say their fee is $18,000. So the question is that all? Or will there be extras? And what does it include? So let's start with, what does it include? Some agencies include the cost of your contract with the surrogate. So they will draft your contract. That cost is usually anywhere between $1,500 and $2,500 US. Some agencies will charge this and then charge this separately through an attorney. Some will include this in that. The next thing is, if you have to escrow money and they have to keep records and give you monthly statements, what do they charge you for the financial management fee, which often ranges anywhere from $2,500 to $4,000. Some charge that in addition to this, some include it. The most important thing that you're going to have to talk about that is way beyond the scope of this talk is insurance for your surrogate. Who's paying for the pregnancy, the delivery, and the care of my children in the hospital? Especially the postnatal care if it's premature twins, because that dollar amount can go up really fast. So you should have someone read, give you an opinion about, and help you find the best insurance you can get, can educate you. That often costs anywhere between $1,000 to $2,500. Some agencies charge that extra, some include it.
Just to clarify, that's not the cost of the policy. That's the cost of the person in the office of the surrogacy agency that would have to research the policy that your surrogate has, look for alternatives, and many agencies would add that as an extra.
Correct. Some agencies, now we talk about add-ons. If you hire a surrogate and for some reason your surrogate doesn't work out, she gets sick, her husband dies, she has 2 transfers unsuccessfully, the doctor recommends another surrogate, something happens and you need another surrogate. Some agencies will say, we will charge you, how much do they charge?
Rematching, you mean?
Yeah, average.
I think a couple $1,000, I don't know.
That's usually about that, somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 to match. They give different levels of support to the intended parents. They give different levels of support to the surrogates. Their approach to it falls into 2 categories. This is a business transaction. We're doing this to make money, and as soon as we've made our money, we're done with you and we're on to the next client. Or, we are part of your family process. You have given us the privilege of participating in building your family, and we will not leave your side until you're done and you're successful. And there are agencies in both categories. The single thing I hear so much about some very reputable agencies in the United States is once the surrogate gets pregnant, they don't hear from them anymore. They're on their own. When our surrogates get pregnant, that's when we start the most communication, all the way from the time of the pregnancy until you're done with the legal proceedings, the parentage, you're back home, and all the insurance bills are paid. You want an agency that looks at this as stepping into your family and taking on a very sacred commitment to you to help you. That you have to learn from the people that run the agency. You have to go shake their hand, you got to look them in the eye, you got to test the mettle of their spirit. There are both kinds. I think you want one that looks at it as, by the end of this process, if I'm not a family member, at least I need to be your friend. I should be the godfather. You should name the baby after me. But if you don't, that's okay. All right, so that's the 2 important topics, and if you have other questions later, I'll be happy to answer them.